Hey everybody, welcome back to One Seed, One World. So we're coming into the new year and it's time to start thinking about planting your gardens for 2024. Some of the first crops that you'll be putting in most likely are things like onions, shallots, and leeks. Normally here in Zone 6B where I am, I start my onions inside really around the first week or two of February, so that way they're ready to put outside pretty early. So it's something you want to start thinking about. So first off, I wanted to recommend a onion variety to you to plant in your gardens this year. And that is the Globo. And this is a fantastic all-around sweet onion. If you space them out properly, they get really big bulbs on them. In a 4x4 foot section of my garden this past year, I probably got a good 30 or 40 pounds of onions. Most of which were the Globo. I also did some red onions too, but it's just a great onion, very tasty, big bulbs, and you can also group them together, if you do them in groups, you'll get smaller bulbs, but you'll get more onions. It just depends whether you want large onions or small onions. You can do it either way. So check out the Globo variety. They're just fantastic. Now I get mine from Baker Creek when I forget to save seeds. So you can get them from Baker Creek, but there are also other vendors I've seen online that sell them as well. So, pick your favorite vendor that does this variety. Now, you might think why you want to use up a portion of your garden for onions when you can get onions, normally fairly cheaply in the store. Well, there's two different reasons for that. Number one is that anything grown in your garden is going to taste way better in the store. You know what went into it. You know what type of fertilizers you used. You know that you've grown it organically, and you don't have to worry about any kinds of things that might come from a grocery store onion. But overall, the flavor is just going to be much better than a store-bought kind. Also, with inflation and crazy price raises that have been going on with food, onions aren't quite as cheap as what they used to be. In fact, onions in the past year have gone up between 100 and 130% in pricing. So they're way more expensive than they were this time last year. Now, one quick thing is the reason why onions fluctuate so much in prices is because they are one of the only agricultural products that cannot be traded as a commodity on the market. Things like corn, wheat, barley, stuff like that are traded as commodities on the market. Trading commodities does help keep prices in check, or at least let people know kind of what people are willing to pay for whatever product it might be. So it kind of keeps them from fluctuating so wildly. Now, the reason why onions aren't allowed to be traded as commodities anymore goes back to the 1950s. There was a guy named Vincent Kosuga who was an onion farmer, but also did a lot of trading in the stock market, especially like in commodities and stuff. He decided, after some failures in wheat trading, to go with what he knew, which was onions. But he decided he also wanted to corner the market and control on what his prices were going to be. So he started buying up onions. He bought so many onions, in fact, that he had to build warehouses, and he had, a partner that worked with him, and around the country they were buying up basically all the onions in the U.S. This was a lot easier to do back in the 1950s, where we didn't have as much monitoring on, where you could watch stuff, what people were doing on the internet, and have so much tracking on what was going on in the market. It's a little bit more secretive back then. You could get away with more stuff. So he's buying up all these onions to the point that he, I think, owned like over 90% of the onions in the United States. Since he owned that large of a percentage of onions in the United States, he could dictate what the prices were going to be when he released them in the market, because he not only was buying the existing onions, he was buying the commodities and the future onions, where he's paying farmers for their future crops. So he's like, I will, say buy your onions at $5 per 50 pounds, and I'll give you this money now. So the farmers get their money now, so they can take care of stuff that they need to do on their farm. he gets the onions at this lower price. Then when he's ready to sell on the market, because he owns so many of the onions, he could set higher prices and make a fortune off of it. I think he made like $8 million or something off of onions back in the mid-1950s, which was a lot of money back then. I mean, it's a lot of money now, but it was a lot, even a lot more back then. So he set the prices, and basically anybody that was buying onions, distributors and stores and stuff, had to pay these higher prices. So he was making all this money. But he still had so many onions left over that he started to bet on basically shorting the market, which means that the price, you're betting that the prices are going to be less, and you can make money that way too. And so that's what he did with all of the extra onions. He flooded the markets in the US with onions. And there were so many onions flooded into the market that you could buy a 50-pound bag of onions for 10 cents. Now back then, the cost of a bag to hold, those net bags that hold 50 pounds of onions, cost 20 cents. So the bags that they came in were worth more than the onions. They couldn't get rid of all the onions. The distributors and stuff, they were just, nobody was eating that many onions. So they were like giving stuff away to orphanages and to schools and all kinds of places, just saying, take these onions, because they're building up on the docks. They were coming in truckloads and train cars. They were just onions all over the place. In fact, in Chicago, there were so many onions on the docks and everything that they had no place to go, that they ended up dumping thousands of pounds of them into the Chicago River, which is not really a broth that you'd probably want to take a taste of. But, so, you know, there was some greed involved there. Vincent Kosuga, you know, he was basically managing the market and laughing all the way to the bank. You know, you can almost hear that sound of greed on the wind.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit.
Anyway, so, of course, onion farmers, especially back in the day, were pretty upset in those areas that were being especially affected, like around Chicago and whatnot. So they went to their then senator, who was Gerald Ford at the time, who later became president of the United States. But at that time, Gerald Ford was a senator. He listened to what the farmers were saying, because a lot of them had been bankrupted over this. I think there was even some that committed suicide. It was just kind of an awful mess. So Gerald Ford put forward a bill in Congress for the Onion Act. And that is the Onion Act that Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was president at the time, ended up signing into law, which made it basically illegal for onions to be traded as a commodity on the market. Probably what they should have done was maybe come out with a law saying that, you know, to prevent like a monopoly where a individual farmer or individual company could only own a certain percentage. But instead they went full tilt and said, nope, you can't trade commodities anymore, or you can't trade onions as a commodity anymore on the market. So that, even 70 years later, has caused onions to fluctuate in prices wildly in the market, so it might not have been the best choice. So that's my story on onions, and I hope that you all are having a fantastic winter, holiday season, Christmas, you know, whatever it is that you celebrate. And now, you know, here we are at New Year's, so I hope you all have a safe and happy New Year in your neck of the woods, and I hope you will continue to come back and hang with me for future videos with the 2024 garden. Also put in the comments below you know, what kind of varieties of onions you've had great success with growing in the past, or what new onions you might be trying this year. We will see you again soon, and if you haven't yet already, please subscribe. But have a great day. Namaste.